Hey, good morning. And I'd like to start out by thanking the team that's there on site today for this Black History Month event. And so thank you so much for asking me to join you today. You know, in this time of climate change with catastrophic fires, the pandemic, social unrest, and the continuing evolution of scientific knowledge, you know, this has been just an extraordinary year, and I don't have to say that as a preface, but during this time, the public has escaped to these parks for physical, mental, and social health, as well as, I believe, spiritual well-being and health. You know, these landscapes are essential landscapes, and not only for society, but for the well-being of the systems on which we depend. The watersheds, the air sheds, the soil sheds, and the habitats, which really hold extraordinary concentrations of biodiversity. And it's really important to remember that our actions affect all of these landscapes, and these healthy natural systems contribute to a healthy quality of life for all Californians. And you know, these parks are crucibles not just of natural history, but of cultural history. And this collection of your 280 California state parks is really extraordinary amongst all of the park systems in the world. And no matter where you live in California, both the cultural and the natural history of where we live is all around you. And experiencing parks by visiting them can offer reflection for each of us about our own homes and the communities where we live. Every one of you is a part of the California story, and parks can provide a window to the California of 500 years ago and the continuing evolution of human landscapes and history, cultural history, and natural history. The Tulare Lake region, where Allensworth sits, has been a geographic center of human connection for a millennia. The Tache tribe of the Yokut people numbered in population of over 70,000 people right there where Allensworth is. And they called the lake that used to be there Pa'asu. The Chumash people from the south coast of California and bands of the southern Miwok from the Sierra Nevada would gather at Tulare Lake to trade. So there were three big groups of Native people who for a millennia traded around the shores of Tulare Lake. It really was one of the busiest hubs of Native American groups in all of California. Really, it's quite an amazing place. Tulare Lake, in 1888, Tulare Lake was 75 miles long and had a surface area of almost 5 times the surface area of Lake Tahoe. Hanford, which is a town which now is about an hour drive north of where you are at Allensworth, in 1888, there was actually a salmon processing plant in Hanford, and that year they processed several 100,000 pounds of salmon out of that lake. I mean, it was an amazingly productive system there. And 1888 for me is important because that's the year that one of my grandmothers was born. So it's also a signal when we go to these places to learn how quickly humans can change the landscapes where we live. And we do have a profound effect on these places. By 1908, when Colonel Allensworth arrived, the San Joaquin Valley was well on its way to becoming one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. And this area where you are really provides the lifeblood for California in terms of food, people, water, and cultures. And Allensworth is not the only park that has direct connections to African Americans in this Black History Month of 2021. African Americans have and continue to be powerful citizens in everyday life, in leading scientific discoveries, working in medicine, engineering, amazing political leaders, social leaders. Black African Americans have worked in military service. They are our neighbors. African Americans are one of us. And just east of Allensworth lies a couple of national parks, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and then to the north, Yosemite National Parks. And in 1899, 1903, and 1904, African American troops known as the Buffalo Soldiers from the 9th Cavalry in San Francisco patrolled those national parks. And in 1903, Army Captain Charles Young was the military superintendent of one of these African-American cavalry units. And they spent the summer building trails in Sequoia. And in his report at the end of the year, he wrote something that was really prescient. And again, I think this gives insight into what parks can reveal to us. And here's what he wrote in his journal. He said, indeed, a journey through this park and the Sierra Forest Reserve to the Mount Whitney country will convince even the least thoughtful man of the needfulness of preserving these mountains just as they are, with their clothing of trees, shrubs, rocks, and vines, and of their importance to the valleys below as reservoirs for storage of water for agricultural and domestic purpose. In this lies the necessity of forest preservation. 1903, 118 years ago. And so it's just really important that when we visit parks, we recognize that these are windows not only into the past, but they're windows into ourselves. And I think that the thing that we have a responsibility to do is to think about the future. And what are we going to do now with everything that's bearing down on us? And what are the decisions we're going to make? And how are we going to support each other so that we can pass these places, this state, to future generations in a condition that hopefully is healthier than the way we find it today. There are other African-American sites that are recognized within the California State Park System. In Southern California, there's a place called the California Citrus Historic Park, and African-American families played a really critical role there. In Old Town San Diego State Historic Park, there is an African-American shop owner who will be visiting this month. And we'll also be talking about things like the contributions of African-American miners at the Marshall Gold Discovery Site Historic Park, just north of Sacramento. So it is my great privilege to welcome you all this morning and to be able to participate in this event, which is part of an acknowledgement of Black History Month in 2021. And thanks to all of you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Geraldine, and operating the camera today is Lori. And we'd like to welcome you to the California State Parks Sports Home Learning Program, and welcome to Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park. This is a park that honors the only town in California founded, funded, and governed by African Americans. First, I'd like to say thank you to Director Quintero for offering those words to us. And actually, everybody learns something new every day, and I learned something new about the salmon up in Hanford. So it was very nice to have him speak before us today before we start our tour. We're going to learn a little bit about this community, the Colonel, and some of the children that lived here. The community was established in 1908, and that was a time before African Americans could really own and just live anywhere they wanted to. 100 years ago, there was a lot of rules that made life difficult just because the color of your skin was different from others. But this community offered opportunities that you couldn't find elsewhere. The town had stores, library, church, hotel, barbershop, and about 200 people lived here at kind of its highest, which is about the year 1916. Now, we're going to learn a lot of history today. We're going to learn technology, science, music, but all of the time period. Remember, the time period is about 1916. Now, one of those residences was Colonel Allensworth, and he's lived in the home that you see behind me. And as we go inside, we're going to learn a little bit about him. And again, I'd like you to remember three things. Again, this community was all African American. The time period was 1916. And something that went on in all rural towns in America in that time period was most rural towns did not have electricity, and Allensworth was one of those towns. So keep those in mind as we take a little travel back in time and learn more about this unique community. So as we go inside, I'd like to have a picture come up of the Colonel and Mrs. Allensworth. So as you see, there's a photo of the Colonel and Mrs. Allensworth. They lived in this house. They built it about 1911. And this was actually their second home. So they lived here and in Los Angeles. Now to get to Los Angeles, nowadays it's 3 hours in a car, but there was no automobiles, very similar to the fact there was no electricity. So to get to Los Angeles, it was a train ride of about 9 hours. Now we're standing in the parlor of the Colonel's home. And behind me, you'll see a piano. And on the pictures is Eva and Nella. So those are his daughters. Now, a little bit about the Colonel himself. He was born into slavery in 1842 in Louisville, Kentucky. He was sold away from his mother at around age 12, but he finally escaped slavery with the start of the American Civil War. He joined the Union Navy, and after the war was over, he worked at some commissary in the shipyards and owned some restaurants. But what he always wanted was education. That was something that was denied to him as a slave. He went back to the Kentucky area and he got his education and he became a teacher and an ordained minister. In 1886, he was encouraged to look at becoming a chaplain for one of the all-Black regiments of the United States Army. And he was appointed to the 24th Infantry in 1886. And of those 4 regiments were the 9th and 10th Cavalry, which was mentioned earlier, and then the 24th and 25th Infantries, of which the Colonel was part of the 24th. He spent the next 20 years with the Army. And as he traveled the United States and its territories, he saw that African Americans were free, but not equal. And so that always kept his mind going on how he could possibly change that. Now his wife, you saw their picture, and his daughters, they followed him to every Army outpost he went to. And they helped him with all of his duties. He was the moral and spiritual guidance of the regiment, but also he performed duties like teacher, librarian, postmaster at times, even treasurer, and they helped him with those duties. Now I mentioned that we're going to be learning history. The whole tour is history, but we're also going to be learning some technology. And as we're standing here in the parlor, I'd like to start with you with some of that technology. Now, let me ask you, when you come into your home at night, it's dark. What do? You want some light, right? So you just flip on a switch, easy. Well, remember, no electricity in 1916 here. So here is our light. And in order to just flip that switch on, you have to make sure that you have some oil in your oil lamp, that your wick is ready to go and trimmed, and that you have the chimney. So I have to take that chimney off, and let's just flip the switch, shall we? Let's see how well we flip the switch here. So I flip that switch, make sure that chimney's on in order to get it from blowing out, and then adjust the wick down so you have a nice, even, soft glow. A small lamp like this, good for walking around in the dark, maybe going out to the outhouse, or just for some light reading. If you need a lot of light, you'd have several of these lamps, or larger ones, or even some chandeliers hanging down from the ceiling. The reason I wanted to show you this technology was to show you this technology. You're looking at it, funny looking little lamp here, but it's a slide projector. So nothing's new under the sun, just the technology it takes to get you there. And to work this, you need a lamp similar to this one I just lit, but it has a reflector, so it keeps the light going forward. It doesn't shine it everywhere. It has a small optic inside the cylinder, and it uses a glass slide. And you can kind of see the slide there. You would put that slide up in front of the lamp here in the optic, close this up, and now you can project your image up onto the wall. This was a nice piece of technology, a good machine that the Colonel would use because he traveled the United States. He recruited and talked to people to come to move to Allensworth and be a part of it.
And that's a lot of people moved here just because of the words that he said. So nice little slide projector, the oil lamp, which I'm going to flip the switch off, and we're going to move into the next room. Pretty easy to turn the light off, a little more difficult to turn it on. So moving into the bedroom here, I did mention there was no electricity, but what I also failed to mention that there was no plumbed water in the community either. So you had to go to a well, fill up barrels of water, keep them outside of your home, and then go out to the barrel as you need it. So let's just say, for instance, that you're waking up in the morning, or maybe you're finished cooking and you need to wash your hands. Well, nowadays we just turn the faucets on, let it run, get some hot water going, make it nice and soapy and wonderful. Well, this is your faucet in an area with no plumbed water. So in here is this nice picture of nice ice cold water. And to turn it on, I just have to pour it into this basin. Now, that's all well and good, except for this water is really cold. And it's pretty cold here. So just think how invigorating it is to stick your hands in this nice cold water like this, splash it on your face. That will get you going in the morning almost better than a cup of coffee. So you can see some of the differences in technology, that we still have it. It's just, now everybody lived here in this community. You're wondering, this was normal for everyone. So it's not like they were missing anything because they might have had electricity or plumbed water somewhere else. In most cases, nobody did. It was still becoming a new thing in the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century United States. So that's a little bit of technology we're learning here in this home. But we're going to move on into the Phillips house and meet some of the children and get ready to go to school with them. As we leave the Colonel's house, and we're going to show a couple of photos, historic photos of the Colonel's house as we go outside. Now the two photos you're seeing, one is of the Colonel's kind of early on. The other one is a few years later. One has no trees, the other one has trees. So it shows you some different time frames. Now, when we actually became a state park in 1976, this house had actually been left abandoned for quite a while, and it had fallen in on itself. So the state parks, they tore it down. They completely rebuilt it with as much of the original material as they could. And what you saw is the house that we were just in, and it is a reproduction original. Now you're looking at a live photo, or not so much a photo, a live shot of the community of Allensworth. You're looking at a rail car, bakery, stores, residence, but you also see that it's very open and very flat. It was mentioned earlier that this was all part of the Tulare Lake Basin. So that big lake that the director mentioned earlier, this community is on that southern edge. So you can see how people are spread out. They all had gardens, maybe some chickens, and a barn or an outhouse, different outbuildings within their homes. So they needed a little bit of space, not so much like what we have now. So I'd like to show you, have come up is a historic photo of the community of Allensworth. And in that photo, you're going to be looking at exactly the same things that you just saw in the live shot. That same bakery, that large store, and the residences are all there. So when the state came in to help make this park, they used oral histories and county maps and government maps, and they were able to reconstruct this park to look exactly like the community did in 1915 to 1916. This is an open air museum. All of these museums are able to, people can come to the park and peek in the windows and get a glimpse of life for that time period. Now the next photo is the Heinzman's General Store. It's a tall building right up front of the park, but it was actually really close to the railroad. And we think a lot of times, we're not sure, but all of those windows were great marketing for for that store. Because it was right there next to the railway station, everybody getting on and off the train, it stopped 8 times a day. Well, maybe they needed something. Maybe, you know, you saw that a man needed a new collar or a shirt, and he could go right into the store and purchase what he needed. The next building or picture you're seeing is the hotel. Now, the hotel was catered to a lot to businessmen. This was an agricultural area, and so you could stop here if you were a merchant, maybe selling your agricultural wares. But if you needed to, stay in the hotel. Cost about 75 cents a night, 7-room hotel. Now, it sounds like a really cheap 75 cents, but remember, a lot of people were really only making $12 a week or maybe $75 a month. So you still really had to budget your money if you were going to stay in the hotel. The next building is the library. Now, the library actually started off as a 1-room schoolhouse and was reconstructed as the library when the 2-room schoolhouse was built. We'll be seeing the 2-room schoolhouse in a little bit. But that library was very special because, again, a lot of African Americans were not given the opportunity to have education, to learn to read and write, or at least their parents and grandparents were. We're looking at, again, the time period. So having a library was something that was incredibly important to this community, because now in a lot of other towns, African Americans weren't allowed into the library, couldn't have books, but here they could, and it was so important to them. Now behind me, you see a little home, it's called the Phillips house. And we're going to be going inside the Phillips here shortly, but Bertie and James Phillips moved here with their 5 children. And unfortunately, shortly after they moved here, James passed away. So that left Bertie and the 5 kids here by themselves to figure out what to do next. She got a pension from James because he was in the Army, but it was only like $12, $13 a month. So I'm trying to think how you can live off of $13 a month with 5 children. So as we move and go into around back to the Phillips house, again, you're seeing how flat and dry the land is. Right now, we're coming slowly out of winter into spring, so we'll see some green going on, but when it gets really dry and hot here in the summertime, everything's going to turn brown again. A lot of this open soil that you're seeing is the alkali in the soil because just nothing grows there from the old lake bed. The little outbuildings and things you're seeing here is the chicken coop. Everybody raised chickens. Chickens were good for meat and for eggs, or maybe you had a hog or a cow for meat or milk. And then the little building that you're seeing there is the outhouse. So we'll talk a little bit more about the outhouse as we go inside. So hello, welcome to the Phillips family kitchen. Now here in the kitchen, well, this room is 4 bedrooms, a front room, and the kitchen. And if you were Mrs. Phillips and her children getting ready to go to school in the morning, there was a lot of activity. So kids were getting up, you had to go outside to use the outhouse, that's the bathroom, and you only did a couple of things in there, and none of them were brushing your hair, getting dressed, or brushing your teeth or anything like that. So again, 6 people moving around, using the outhouse, coming in here to wash up their hands and face, maybe brush their teeth. They got chores to do. So mom had to get up and get the big wood burning stove here going, get it nice and hot so she can cook breakfast and dinner and supper for the rest of the day. And the kids were getting dressed, making their beds, maybe finishing up some chores, feeding chickens, collecting eggs, picking things out of the garden. So everybody had something to do. Now with bacon and eggs, that's what we're going to have for breakfast this morning. Bacon was something that was cured, so you didn't need to have refrigeration. Wait a second. Did they have refrigeration back then? No electricity, but they did have something here called an ice box. You put ice up here in the top, and if you needed more ice, you could just put up a little sign here like this in your window, and the Iceman would come and say, oh, you need 25 pounds of ice. They would cut that off of a big block, bring it into your home, set it right here into your ice box. So down below, because cold air goes down, that's where you keep anything cool. So you take your bacon out, big slab, start cutting off some slabs of bacon, get it frying here, nice hot frying pan, because everything is hot on a big wood burning stove like this. After the bacon's cooked, set it off to the side to keep it warm. Just crack the eggs right inside that bacon grease. Save the bacon grease for later on. Use everything. You know, recycling and reusing things is actually nothing new. Everybody reuse things as much as possible. So now we got bacon and eggs going. Oh, it smells wonderful. The kids are all getting all crazy because they're having to get dressed and get ready to go and they're moving around. So once that all happens, breakfast is eaten, kids are out the door. That leaves Mrs. Phillips and her youngest child, Irene, to clean up the mess, finish a few things. Now, bread and butter were probably something made every single day or almost every day in this community and lots of communities. Now, this is where science comes in. We are going to change liquid into a solid. Or we're going to at least try to start that. And it's something that if any of you watching haven't done before, I'd like to give it a try. You have two ingredients. You need a jar with a tight fitting lid and some heavy whipping cream. So with this, take your heavy whipping cream out of the fridge a couple hours, let it warm up, because it works a little better with warmer cream. Put it in your jar, just a little bit, halfway, don't fill it all the way up. And all you're going to do is shake it. And what you're doing is agitating it. And you're going to get those fat molecules moving around, and eventually they're all just going to clump together and make a little pat of butter. And you can do this on a large scale or a small scale, but it's good for just experimenting and trying. But you have to do this constantly for anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. And what it'll do is first it'll make whipped cream. And then it'll turn it to make it look at kind of little like cottage cheese. And then all of a sudden it'll get really quiet. And you're like, there's nothing in here. It's not moving around. And then it'll just change to a liquid and you'll hear it sloshing around in there. You'll have a little pat of butter and the rest will be buttermilk. Pour out the buttermilk, add a little salt to that butter, and you have one delicious science experiment. So I hope everybody will give this a try and make some butter. So Mrs. Phillips done her chores. She's made some butter. Let's see, it's Monday, washing day. And who doesn't like to have some music when they're doing their chores, especially washing? So let's come inside and let's see about some music. Now here is the iPad of the day. And in order to get the iPad to work, I have to charge it. Here's the song. It's a record. One song, one side. You need a second song, flip it over. So you need a number of these if you want to listen to music for a while. But the other thing you have to do is charge it up. Just charge it up. Okay, I'm charging it up. It takes a little bit of time, so be a little patient, please. And as we're going, we're going to listen to a kind of a quick song like a foxtrot. And I think that should be good. And let's see what we got here. Now with a song like this, you know, it just makes you want to get up and dance, but I'm sure it also helps making some of those chores, especially when you're scrubbing on a scrub board and having to do your laundry. Now I can listen to the song all day. I can listen to the song all day, but unfortunately, we're going to have to move on. So, but I hope you enjoyed that little bit of music from the time period. Again, you saw no chords because you're not plugging it into the wall. So you have to charge it up the way I did every single time you want to listen to a song. We'll head out now, and we're going to go to school with some of the Phillips kids. So who you're looking at now is Irene Phillips. Oh, sorry. You're looking at the children they're at their school picture day, and you'll see Elizabeth and James have been highlighted, and those are two of the Phillips children. And you'll see how the girls are dressed. They're all dressed in skirts with big bows in their hairs. Ladies, that's how you all dress. Girls did not wear pants in those days. Now, you young gentlemen, you are wearing short pants or knickerbockers that go to the knee, and then all of you are wearing a stocking covering up your legs, and you're wearing a leather shoe. Girls, like I said, you're wearing bows in your hair, but boys, you're wearing a hat. You're probably collared all the way up, and in some cases, you always wore a tie to school too. So, and that was normal. You did that every day, not just for picture day. So that's what some of the kids would be wearing at the time. Now, the photo you see now is Irene Phillips. She is the youngest sister of the two you just saw, and she's feeding some dogs there. But if you see in the background, that's actually the back side of the Colonel's house. So the Colonel and the Phillips were neighbors. So what you're seeing is a map of the Tulare Lake Basin. Said it was mentioned earlier with the director about the lake basin here that has been around for so long, and it covered such a huge expanse. And like I said, we were part of that area. If you ever come out to Allensworth and you're walking around, you'll see on the ground shells of freshwater shells that were once part of this lake basin. Now, the next photo is the historic school. Well, it's still the school. So that is a historic photo. It is a 2-room schoolhouse, and it replaced the 1-room schoolhouse. All 8th grades, 1st grade through 8th grade, all went together in that 2-room schoolhouse. And the first, the first school, whole class was 29 students. So all 8th grade, 29 students in 2 rooms. Now, who was in charge of all those kids was William Payne. And you've seen his photo now. And he was a teacher that was so well loved by everybody. So all of the kids loved him because he'd go out and play with them. But when he got back into the classroom, it was business as usual, and he helped you learn, and he made you enjoy it. You enjoyed learning. The parents loved him because he was well respected, and he knew that they knew he was giving their children a great education. So what you're seeing now is some 5 ladies on a celebration day. Unfortunately, you don't know which celebration they were doing, but the lady on the very far right is Margaret Prince. And she was the first assistant with William Payne. She taught the younger classmen, 1st and 2nd graders, but she also taught music. And on certain days, she might have had to help with a lot of the other classes that were going on. And again, well respected. This was one of her first teaching jobs that she got as soon as she graduated from school. So behind me is the school, and it has been sitting here since 1912. And children actually went to school here until 1972, when they moved down to another portion of the community. And so there's a lot of education, a lot that went on inside the school. It was not just the school, but it was also church, civic meetings, voting happened there. And ladies, America didn't give women the right to vote until 1920, but California actually gave women the right to vote in 1911. So when this community became a judicial district in 1914, women were voting here. And we have records that show that a number of the women, including Mrs. Allensworth, were registered voters. So that in itself is an exciting piece of history for Allensworth. As we go inside the school, we're going to learn a little bit about what the kids did, some of the technologies that they had to use or what to do their schoolwork with. So welcome to the schoolhouse. So this is just a great building. And again, it's one of our most original buildings here. But so where we just came in on one side room, the other side is on the other side of this wall. So 1st through 4th were on one side, 5th through 8th on the other. Children here were learning reading, writing, arithmetic, but music, you see the piano up front, and agriculture. Agriculture was a big part of this area, it's good to learn. But they were also learning something unique that nobody else in the country was probably learning, and that was Black history. So the children were learning about the people who did things that gave them, the children here, opportunities to go on. So a lot of things, big names here that were definitely learned were for Douglass and Booker T. Washington. So a lot of great knowledge was passed along through these walls here in the school. Now the technology I talked about was pen and ink. Nowadays you have your pen, you click it, you have the ink all right in there. But how would you like to have to do your papers with pen and ink? So put your ink in here, dip your pen in, write a few words, and then you'd have to refill your ink pen and do it more. So the other thing that was taught here was penmanship, because if you couldn't write legibly, people couldn't read what you were saying, then how were you going to get your point across? And you didn't want to drip that ink along your pages either, so you had to be neat. The other thing that was a very useful tool is the iPad of the day. Pretty simple, right? It's a slate, piece of chalk, which you've seen around, if you can kind of see here, around the walls of both rooms with slates all the way around. So the teacher, William Payne, he would write on the slates here, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, so on, and they would have their lesson plans. And then to do some of their lessons, they needed this. So let's do a quick lesson, shall we? Let's do a simple math problem where we're going to take the year we're in now, 2021, and we are going to minus the year that this community was established. Now, if everybody's doing this, I hope you get the answer. And the answer is 113. So 113 years ago, this community was established, an all African-American community in California. And that was very unique and very beneficial for the people who lived here, because all the people who came after them, their children and children, got to move forward in the United States and got to do more than they did. Now, here with this is your delete button. Simple, easy to use delete button. You delete out your work and then do a new problem. So when you did your problem, you showed it up to the teacher and he would say, yes, you got it right, or no, sorry, you got to do it again. But just erase it out and redo your problem. Like I mentioned before, William Payne would go out. Now, you know, you kind of see the croquet set here on the floor. Baseball was the other big games that kids would play when they would go out for recess and time out. Same with jacks and marbles. We had a woman who passed away a few years ago, but she remembers actually going to school here as a young girl, and she played jacks out on the steps that we walked up as we came in. And they asked her what she remembered of that time, and she goes, he cheated. So it just goes to show you that William Payne was willing to get out with the kids and have a good time with them, tease them, but once you got back in that classroom, you heard all the things that the children were learning here. So they had a very good, well-rounded education. And because of that good rapport with the teacher, they were more than willing to get more education. A number of girls went on to schools called normal schools, which were schools that taught teachers to be teachers. and became teachers themselves, and actually came back here and then taught at Allensworth themselves. So it was a big circle, it was a big community, a lot of things going on here at the time period, but the one thing that we have to remember most is we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us. So a lot of people are standing on the shoulders of Colonel Allensworth and all of the people that lived here in Allensworth because of what they did when they created this town. So with that, we are gonna put up a screen if you have any questions, to please contact us. And I would like to thank you so much for joining us here at Colonel Allensworth and learning about this unique community. And I hope one day that you're all able to come and visit us. Thank you so much.